Europe is facing many security challenges. The Maltese Presidency has prioritised it as one of the most important things that needs to be tackled for this generation. Joining me today in the studio, Ambassador Sorin Ducaru, NATO's Assistant Secretary General for Emerging Security Challenges, Pauline Massart, Friends of Europe's Deputy Director for Security and Geopolitics, Edoardo Camilli, founder of Horizon Intelligence, Ildiko, Voller-Szenci, head of Brussels office of the Antall Jószef Knowledge Centre. Welcome to all of you. Ambassador, let me start with you first. NATO and the EU are building up a much more sophisticated rapport for cyber defence. What stage are we at with that?
We are interconnected in so many ways, but in the cyber domain we are literally interconnected, and we have started our interaction in this field already a long time ago. But since the NATO Warsaw Summit, NATO and the EU have signed a joint declaration of cooperation, and cyber defense is one of the key domains of such cooperation. This is a team sport, and no one alone, none of us alone, can be better informed, smarter, and better protected than all of us together.
What are the big risks? Is it to infrastructure primarily?
Not only. There are attacks that aim at exfiltrating sensitive information, disrupting the functionality of our systems and infrastructure, and in some cases even attacks with potential destructive effects. So what I can say in qualitative terms, we see an increase in intensity, in sophistication of cyber attacks, and we need to keep up with this in constant and while cooperating together.
Ildiko, what do you see as the key challenges for Europe at the moment? Where is it strong and really where does it need to improve?
Generally, what we can say about cyber attacks is that it can be carried out either by a state or by private organizations or private people. And it's really difficult to see who is the main problem. Is the problem coming from bottom up, or it's the problem coming from up to bottom? Somewhere we have to say that a little bit this cyber crime area is like a little bit of a game changer, basically, because certain actors don't know really how to react to a crime or a warfare crime which is behind the scenes many times. So many times the people don't even know that they were attacked. Thanks God that so far nobody was killed in such an attack. So at the moment, what we see is that it's an economic problem. It causes economic damage. A lot of euros are wasted because of that. And this is basically the main and biggest challenges for the European Union.
Well, Camilli, are we dealing more with a private sector concern, or is this a massive public security issue?
I think the private sector faces very similar challenges than the public one. If we talk about information theft or hacking, of course the private sector is also in the front line, and this causes many problems. One, of course, is the business intelligence, so information that are patented by a company that could be released to others and this could hamper the competitiveness of companies. And the other one is also in terms of political stability and political risk, because apart from hard attacks, we also see the use of cyber to retrieve information that could destabilize countries, and destabilize countries, of course, has an impact on the economy, and then on regulation, and then on the way that companies operate in an environment.
Pauline Massart, what does Europe have to do that it's not doing at the moment?
I think Europe, as much as NATO and its allies, have to focus on building resilience, be it in the cyber world or beyond. If we're talking cyber defense, we need to build resilience because it's the only way to deter. Deterrence by what one might call conventional means does not work in the cyber field, which is why I'm actually rather encouraged by some of the measures agreed by the EU and NATO to work on things like training and hygiene, which will naturally build resilience. But of course, resilience can be built in other ways, and resilience should be applied really to all spheres of society when you talk about security, in particular if you talk about hybrid warfare and the so-called propaganda wars that we're facing today.
Ildiko, how prepared is Europe's general defence? What do you think the European Commission needs to focus on? What do you think the Maltese Presidency needs to really emphasise in the next few months of its direction?
I do agree with them that they put the priority on research and innovation. I think this is that area which really needs to be supported by all the member states, and I really see an openness by all of them. If you compare the data between Europe and the United States, you really see a 5 times difference how much they put as an input into innovation and research. It would be a great thing to the economy, it would be a great thing not only to the security, but I think to all fields would be really supported by this research.
Edoardo, war is generally good for the economy in terms of innovation, not that we like the other side effects. But do you see that this is a moment where innovation and those nations which are ready to invest in defence will actually get an economic benefit?
Absolutely, absolutely. And as Ildiko mentioned, this type of situation can really foster innovation into new type of technologies. And for instance, in the recent years, we have seen, mostly in the US, new companies emerging from exploiting and leveraging the big data natural language processor algorithm for detecting terrorist threats online. And also we could use it within Europe for detecting radicalization networks.
Pauline, the migration crisis and the connection that we have with dealing with large numbers coming from Africa, do you see Europe learning in terms of its general defence strategy from this real-life episode?
Well, look, I think the overall challenge that the European Union faces today is that it has to combine improving its long-term strategic foresight with fighting today's fires. Now, the good news is doing one will in fact help with the others. The External Action Service has, as you know, produced this new global strategy. It is now working to implement it via a number of initiatives. In terms of priorities for this and future presidencies, I would say it is really the concrete implementation of these actions, be it in research, be it in pooling and sharing, be it in development of new capabilities, and be it in the European Union acting really as a catalyst to help its individual member states strengthen their capabilities to do that. But of course, another extremely important aspect is that we take a whole of government, if not whole of society approach to security, not to use the NATO term comprehensive approach. Because of course, ensuring our security in the long term will be as much about investing in development and capacity building in our partner countries as it is about building our defense capabilities today.
Ambassador, President Trump speaks about Europe not pulling its weight, but it depends how you calculate the investment in defence as well. It's not just about the hardware, as Pauline says, it's about the other elements to do with research and investment, but also the soft diplomacy and development aid as well. Is Europe really a leader in defence in these terms?
Europe is definitely key in assuring a balanced approach to our security. And in NATO, we have adopted in Wales 3 years ago this defense investment pledge, which means to reach 2% of GDP for defense investment over a period of a decade. It's interesting to note that in the 90s, every ally was investing 2 or more % of GDP for defense, and we wanted to use the opportunity of the peace dividend to actually go down. But frankly, the threat environment that we're facing today obliges us to come back to the let's say approach that we also had in past, in the sense of prioritizing security. And the issue is not the issue of input. Output is also important. So yes, 2% of GDP for defense is important. I think the extra investment in soft security, and this was one of the key issues, for example, the Munich Security Conference, where ideas were to add another maybe 1% above the 2% for the other aspects, to have a more comprehensive approach. It's important also how we do it. We should definitely do it in close partnership with the private sector, with civil society, because we're in it together. And I fully agree with Pauline, because in certain domains like high tech, we need also to change the way we procure, the way we operate, the way we take decisions. We need to be definitely more agile in so many ways.
NATO has paid a lot of attention to the hybrid warfare element. Does it have the funding to really go to develop the resilience, to develop the capacity to repel an attack, or are we simply trying to build a wish list of things that need done?
Resilience aspects are, frankly, state responsibilities, and it's up to national states, be it EU members or allies within NATO, to really prioritize investment.
There's a pledge to
and
do this.
It was in this context that NATO adopted a cyber defense pledge to prioritize investment and strengthening national cyber defenses, but at the same time, strong focus in developing resilience over the whole society. Now, NATO as an organization can have a role in determining some benchmarks, some coordination elements, and especially this aspect of linking not just information among members and intelligence, but also aspects related to training, best practices, and if needed, also coordinated response. So this is the value of organizations like NATO or EU.
Okay, Pauline, Massart, the risk of an infrastructure collapse, for example, the electricity supply shut down, which will shut down the water supply, and after a week or 2 weeks, society itself will begin to disintegrate. Has Europe got a grip on the reality that the threat this presents to its democracy?
Difficult question to answer. I think certainly there is an awareness of some of the threats and the risks coming from the cybersphere. There is some degree of resilience. I mean, you speak specifically of electricity networks. Take the example of a country like France, which has done a lot of work on making its electrical networks secure and, more importantly, resilient in case of failure, be it through attack or through a natural disaster. But I think it'll be interesting to start being a bit more forward-looking. What are the risks linked to the connected health thing that we're seeing developing in Europe, which obviously brings incredible economic opportunities and really the opportunity for citizens to have access to better healthcare. But what happens if a pacemaker is hacked? What happens if a patient database is hacked? There is so much there, and I believe the EU's only just begun working on it. Certainly it has begun, but there is a long way to go until we reach answers.
Edoardo, in a connected society, in a wearable digital society, what happens when it all goes wrong? How do we prevent it?
Well, this is of course for private sectors and mostly the producer of technology and the so-called Internet of Things is the main threat at the moment. We have, as Ms. Massart said, wearable devices also for medical purposes. If they got hacked, they could really cause huge harm to the public health. And of course, technology goes way faster than policies, and this is probably one of the main challenges for the European Union to create good policies. And if you look also a bit forward with the development, for instance, of self-driving cars, this could also be hacked and used for terrorist attacks if we can, create a new threat such as self-driving car ramming or self-driving car bombing. It's a serious threat.
Pauline, Massart, the idea that data intelligence needs to be shared to combat cybercrime and to protect when it comes to cyber defense, is Europe any good at data sharing? Are the systems interoperable at the moment?
Well, to be perfectly honest, this all comes down to improving our models of public-private partnership. Because Ildiko made an interesting point earlier about a lack of cyber expertise, which of course is a serious problem that faces the public sector across both sides of the Atlantic, of course. But that expertise can be found in the private sector. Number one. Number two, a lot of the systems that we need, such as encryption systems, to protect our systems, are available on the market from the private sector. So perhaps it's time to rethink a little bit the approach that we take to public-private partnerships in Europe, but also within a NATO context. And perhaps think of new models of procurement when it comes to cyber defense specifically.
Let's finish on the idea of Security Council for Europe. Ambassador, we have some embryonic systems, INCENT, for example, based at the European Commission External Action Service, this embryonic data sharing. Do you think Europe needs to do more as a union to defend itself in this capacity?
Well, absolutely. I think we all have to do more. And at individual, national level, industry, this is by definition, multi-stakeholder environment. I think we should be faster. That's clear. And we should never have any sense of complacency.
Let's finish on that. Thank you to our guests today, Ambassador Sorin Ducaru, Pauline Massart, Friends of Europe, Edoardo Camilli, and Ildiko Voller-Szenci. I'm Brian Maguire.